Welcome back, everyone. Check out the puppet combo swag. This is not foreshadowing for anything in particular. Recently, I made a community post where I asked you guys to give me your most heinous takes, your horror hot takes. Obviously, my sample size is slightly biased because of the fact that most of my videos are about like analog horror and internet horror as opposed to the wider culture of horror. But regardless, I think this is going to be a fun experiment for a video. This is something new, so if you like it, please, engage with it. Let me know that you like it. I really think the format of this could be something pretty cool and some way that I can interact with you guys on a more regular basis. So yeah, let's see how this goes. Basically how it works is I've compiled a list of a bunch of comments and questions and hot takes that you guys created, you guys sent to me, and we're just going to go through them one by one, talk about them, respond to them, see what people think, see what people like, what they don't like, and yeah, thank you for joining me. Let's get into it. It's rare to find a genuinely good analog horror video these days. It's usually either the incredibly overused trope of emergency, big scary thing spotted outside your front door, or something like that, just very weak. I'm still glad that there is good stuff out there. Yes, to some extent, I also kind of feel that a lot of analog horror is relying on the same few tropes over and over again. As you specifically mentioned, the emergency trope. There's another YouTuber, I think it might be Jenny Nicholson, although I don't totally remember, so don't quote me on that, but there's another YouTuber who said something along the lines of the children yearn for rules. They yearn for really specific structure. Here's the steps that you must take, or here are the rules that the creature follows as it's trying to stalk you or mimic you or destroy the surrounding area, whatever. And that's another thing that you've heard me complain about many times in these videos. It's the mimic. The mimic's out to get you guys. Something sneaking around, pretending to be you. It's talking in your voice. It's adopting the behaviors of your friends. I'm sick of the mimic. I'm sick of the trope of the mimic. I don't know if you can tell. I'm currently writing an analog horror. I don't know what's going to happen with it, but part of what I want to do is introduce elements of parody to it. I want to make just one episode that's just the whole thing is the mimic trope. I don't know. However, the cool thing about analog horror and creepypasta and internet horror in general, a lot of it's made by like teenagers, young adults. Not that that specifically matters, but what matters more is the barrier to entry is practically non-existent. You don't need to have $1 million. You don't need a massive production team. Hell, you don't even really need to be a particularly talented artist yet. Quite a few analog horror stories are just text, then picture, then text, then picture, over and over again. And I mean, come on, if Urban Spook could do it, I'm pretty sure that you guys could do it even better. And that ends up being the trade-off with independent anything, any sort of independent art, is that with the barrier to entry being lower, more people are going to try to make stuff. More people are going to copy each other. More people are going to make things that are not the quality, be it production or writing or art or whatever, that you might be accustomed to from going to a movie theater and watching a movie. Regardless, there is still good stuff out there. There's lots of good stuff. There's new incredible artists coming out onto the analog horror scene and all the adjacent horror scenes on YouTube literally every couple of weeks. I can't even keep up with them. It's like whack-a-mole. Like I genuinely end up watching a pretty significant amount of new analog horror almost every single day. There's just so much cool stuff along with the garbage. And most of the garbage nowadays is pretty obviously like AI generated, which makes it easy to filter through the shit. I wish there were more silent jump scares. The loud ones can be effective, but imagine there's a character in a dark room and the camera slowly pans to show something uncanny walking really fast towards them before they notice. No music, no loud noise, just silent terror before the camera cuts to something else. And I love it when movies do this. And you're right, I haven't seen too many analog horror or internet horror creators utilize this feature. I don't really know what else I could add to this. That's the biggest potential issue of this, is a lot of you guys are probably a lot smarter than me. So you're going to have hot takes or ideas that I'm just going to be like, yeah, I agree. Hell yeah, guys, that makes sense. This one's interesting. As a person of color, I strongly dislike the cannibal trope. If you search for cannibal movies, nearly every single one focuses on a savage brown tribe eats white people, or poor brown people eat white middle class people. And this isn't just something in old films either. There are plenty of examples in modern media, and it feels very perpetuating old stereotypes of brown people being dangerous savages. I think there are situations where it is done non-racially. Silence of the Lambs is a good example, but 9 times out of 10 it all feels very icky. And then they also added, I want to say your videos have unironically gotten me through some hard times recently. Appreciate you. Thank you. And I mean, first off, notice the color of my skin. I don't know that my take on this is one that the world necessarily needs. But as a person who hasn't actually seen a ton of cannibal horror movies, the few that I have do indeed follow this trope. Although a lot of the ones that I've seen have been older. I haven't seen that many new cannibal horror movies. And yeah, you can find that in a lot of not even just horror, but just art in general. You go back and you see there's a lot of prejudice that exposes itself through the ways certain stories are told, whether that's racism, sexism, ableism. The views of the author or the creators often subconsciously come through in the art that they make. One of my favorite obvious examples of this is Lovecraft's stuff. Like his intense fear and hatred of minorities and women and just everybody, really, just insane xenophobia, are fundamental to the stories that he would tell. The class thing that you mentioned is interesting too. The poor people eating the middle class people as a fear thing too, because the movie's directed towards middle class people, right? It's all very gross. There are lots of examples of this type of thing in all sorts of tropes throughout art. Yeah, maybe it's time for us to make a new cannibal movie. I envision a world where we can all be cannibals. No specific creed or the color of your skin or your gender or whatever. Nothing will bar you from the sacred act of consuming the flesh of a fellow human being. Can I get an amen? Can I get an amen? Horror is at its best when it explores more taboo or emotional subjects with deep earnesty. Not specifically for shock value, but for genuine desire to explore the effects, causes, and what it's like living in these taboo subjects. When you write horror, you as the writer have to be a bit uncomfortable too. Horror is there to make us squirm, so write what makes you squirm. And I think that's what a lot of transgressive or transgressive adjacent horror creators and filmmakers and artists in general miss. When you go to great lengths to disturb or shock the audience, that is a pretty powerful emotion that you're playing with. And sure, you could just shock and disturb them, but it's like someone gets killed or sexually assaulted. Then what, And I apologize if that sounds crass, but it's true. In most great works of art, things happen for a reason, and it invokes both an emotional response in people and forces you to think about something. There are messages in everything that you write and read and watch and make and hear, whatever. And horror as a genre allows you to experience kind of vicariously things that maybe you haven't yet, or maybe you never will, through this obscene or strange or exaggerated lens. The best works of horror often tie into deeper, more complex emotional themes or political themes. And yeah, all this is to say, I agree. Horror is at its best when it explores really taboo or emotional subjects with earnesty. As a society, we are right now just generally earnesty deprived. I feel like everything is trying to be ironic, and at a certain point it kind of gets grating. It gets old. I think indie creators need to stop explaining so much, even when it comes to lore. There's a lot of work that goes into building a world that creates an immersive horror experience, and it's natural to want to share it, but it makes for a better writer and a better experience to leave some things unsaid, maybe not even mentioned. And I think a great example of this idea we just saw on the channel with the MLP Infection AU by Misgender, the Everfree infection. We were introduced to this sprawling world that has been totally changed from how the world normally is in the show. We're introduced to many different types of creatures, an infection that works a specific way, and most of the other infection AUs that we've covered start with, here's a list of rules on how to escape. Here's a list of the stages on how the infection corrupts you over time. Meanwhile, this one didn't do any of that. It allowed the story to unfold through the character writing and through like environmental storytelling, just little things that showed up in the art that fleshed out the world. And it made the whole experience 1,000 times more immersive. And I understand that using a My Little Pony infection AU as an example here might be a little bit silly, especially if you haven't seen any of my videos before. Well, that's what I have most recently in my brain to draw from, so that's what I'm using here. Also, I just think it works. If you're looking down on My Little Pony infection AUs as an art form, you are missing out. The name folk horror doesn't fit the genre it describes. You would think it would be horror based on the folklore and folk beliefs of various cultures, but no, it's just religious horror with the cult being in the woods. Indoctrination, isolation, and the metaphorical exploration of past traumas are all fine and dandy. I'm just saying I was expecting, based on the genre name, a story about a peasant girl thrown in a well by raiders, and now the well of the water is thick and black and stinking of carrion, and from it there come thousand-throated screams, and now the village goats are all lame, and two-headed children are being born, etc. What does that have to do with Billy Bob number 57 goes to Europe land to investigate the family of the rising sun, and Medita with the blonde hair reminds him of his dead drunk mother, and she throws him into a bonfire as the family of the rising sun runs circles around him. Roll credits. Billy Bob has a smartphone, by the way, and this is all happening in 2016. Like, that's not folk horror. I mean, it is, but why? Aside from the ending of your description there, I've got to ask, like, it really felt like you're referring to The Wicker Man to me, which is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and I am now personally offended on behalf of the great Christopher Lee. How could you say that about him? I'm joking. I know that you didn't mean that one. I think a lot of recent horror has ended up being religious horror to some extent. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I don't know. We've had an abundance of it recently. A lot of, all culminating with, spoilers if you haven't seen Weapons. It's culminating with weapons. That was the spoilers. There's a witch in it. I'm sorry. But I feel like there are a lot of horror movies that specifically dive into the folklore and folk beliefs of various cultures. Even ones that are also religious horror, like something like The Witch. Like the story that you described first as a good example of your genre felt like The Witch to me. Guy who's only ever seen The Witch. I don't know. I agree with your thesis, but I also think that there are both types of movies, and if you go looking, you might be able to find more that specifically delve into belief systems and folk stories. Yes, I agree to be in one of your videos. My agent will contact your unpaid publicist. Now, how is your agent going to contact you? Now, this one's kind of funny because we started this video with the idea that analog horror is dead. Analog horror doesn't work anymore, or most of them aren't very good. Obviously, I'm exaggerating the original take, but this one is, I don't know how much of a hot take this is, but I keep getting recommended videos that say X type of horror is dead, and honestly, I don't think a genre dies. Just because it gained more popularity doesn't make it bad. More content can equal more bad content. Let me stop you right there. Why are we calling art content? Blech. I'm kidding. It does not erase the good ones. I'm mostly referring to people I saw saying elevated horror and analog horror are dead, and I do not agree with that. It might be overflowed with content, some bad and some good as well, but it isn't dead, and I will die on that hill. And I will die beside you. We will be comrades in arms against the incoming horde of people jumping on a trend. Because what do you mean, elevated horror is dead? Like, I've been seeing that a lot recently, too. This idea that things like Hereditary or The Babadook are lesser forms of horror, or like critic bait, because they, explore themes? Oh no, guys, it's not a straight slasher. It's got psychological stuff in it too. My horror movie was a metaphor for depression. I just wanted it to be about killing, goddammit. I don't know. I don't think analog horror or elevated horror or what have you is going anywhere. To some degree, I think that there's a large amount of people who just don't conceptualize or think of the idea that they saw it already. That doesn't mean everyone else has too. And there's always new people. You know, when I was 15 years old, I saw Hereditary for the first time and it blew my mind. It scared the shit out of me. I watched it at like 2 o'clock in the morning on a computer screen. I watched it with very legal methodology. And yes, since seeing Hereditary, I've seen a lot of horror movies, a lot of A24 horror movies that feel like they're trying to emulate the same thing. And after 20 of them, you do get to a point where you're like, all right, I've seen this same plot over and over and over again. Every year, there's 1 billion more people turning 15 and seeing Hereditary for the first time again. And it might not be Hereditary for them. But just because something has grown stale for you, or you have gotten older or whatever, that doesn't mean that the thing itself is lesser. Like, FNAF isn't not scary anymore. You're just an adult now. And it was for 13-year-olds to begin with. No hate if you still like FNAF as an adult. Like, I think FNAF is cool. I wasn't really a part of the internet when it was coming out, so I only became introduced to it way later in my life. The number of people who are like, yeah, mascot horror today is terrible and garbage, and back in my day it was good. It's pretty similar, you know? It's feeding the same need of introducing younger people to the horror genre using an easily digestible format that involves a bunch of lore, some recognizable characters, and jump scares. Okay, I apologize in advance to the person who sent this. I feel mean, but this one's terrible. None of the classic horror movies are scary. I'm not sure why this is the case, but I think it might just be that culture moves too quickly. I really would love to know which you're referring to as classic and how you're defining scary. Because now I've seen a lot of things, I'm pretty desensitized in a lot of ways. Not much scares me to begin with. Like, I can recognize that something is creepy or disturbing, and it might make me think about it a little bit, but nothing scares me in the same way that I would get scared of stuff when I was a kid and be hiding under the covers and afraid of the closet and shadows on the wall. That doesn't happen to me anymore, most of the time. But, like, to say that none of the classics are spooky or scary is wild to me. Like, when I think of the classics, I think of stuff like Wicker Man or The Shining, like 70s, 60s. There's even, Nosferatu is scary. I understand this take more if you're the type of person who just doesn't like old movies in general, meaning movies from, more than 20 years ago. Recently, me and my girlfriend and my roommate were all looking at like Netflix or something, trying to find something to watch. And my roommate referred to Dirty Dancing and Baby Driver as two really good movies. If you're unaware, those movies are, one is a lot older than the other. Then my girlfriend said, aren't those old people movies? When did Baby Driver come out? Let's find out. 2017? But yeah, my point being, if you're like in your 20s and you haven't seen a lot of old movies, like I love movies, I've seen a bunch of older films. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to movies. I understand you being off-put by the way that they're written, the way that they look. It's a very different feel to current horror movies, regardless of genre. But this take gets even worse, in my opinion, if you apply the classic term to slashers. Like, Nightmare on Elm Street scared the shit out of me, and I was 16, 17 years old when I saw it. That movie is fantastic. I don't know. I just fundamentally disagree. I like Art the Clown in concept, but the Terrifier movies are terrible. How dare you? How dare you? You don't like watching a woman get sawed in half? What is even wrong with you? No, but for real, I actually really like the Terrifier movies, even the first one. Like, I understand that the acting is like porno quality and it's a pointless movie, but like you said, Art the Clown as a character, just the entertainment value of watching David Howard Thornton, I think I'm saying his name correctly, play that character is all all the charisma in the world that I needed to continue watching the other two movies. The second one and the third one are amazing. They definitely corrected in the right direction. And I don't know, like, I love the Saw movies too. To me, the Terrifier movies are fun. Like, they're very gory, very graphic. There's a ton of fantastic practical effects. The second and third one are written pretty well, even if the second one's a little bit bloated. And dude, Art the Clown. Also, Elliot Fulham has like a whole separate, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly too, I might be not, but he has like a whole music career that's all really good. It reminds me of Elliott Smith and Duster. Like he wears the influence on his sleeve, but it's amazing. And he used to do interviews with rock stars and metal bands, and I love the Terrifier movies. I've been a big fan for forever. I got to see the third one in theaters right when it came out. It was awesome. I particularly liked how they introduced a character who was not sympathetic to the fact that the main characters are victims of something horrible. This kind of like true crime-esque podcaster girl, I think it's been a while since I saw the movie, who follows them around and asks really, really embarrassing or just over-the-line questions trying to get them to reveal more of their traumatic experience. Then Art the Clown comes in later and completely, ruins that person's day and life. Which ties back into what we said earlier. Horror movies and all art have something to say, whether you realize it or not. And I also have something to say. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this slight change of pace. We are Legion. I will see you in the next transmission.